Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm DJ Sixsmith. Welcome to Sit Down. Fareed Zakaria here with us. He's got a brand new book, 10 Lessons for a Post-Pandemic World, also on Simon Schuster Audio. Fareed, what's up? How are you?
Very well. Thanks for having me.
You got it. So your book is extremely timely, and it's also relevant because hopefully we will be past COVID-19 at some point. So you're somebody who's written a lot, talked a lot about major important issues. What was it like putting this together?
This was different from anything I've done before because what happened is, you remember right after COVID hit, sort of late March, it was almost like the world shut down. So all of a sudden, every trip I had got canceled, every piece of travel, all of a sudden I'm not going into the office. And as a result, even though I had my kids with me and stuff, I just had a lot of free time. And at the same time, I start thinking about what are we in? How does one make sense of this? What is this world going to look like? So I decided to kind of do my therapy on paper, and I started to write down what I thought was happening, and I liked the way it was going. And then what I do is, for about 4 months, I got up every morning around 6:30, and I would sit down and I would write without looking at the day's news, without asking myself what was happening, because I wanted to sort of elevate myself to that longer term horizon. And it proved to be a really a very good disciplining tool to say to you, to force yourself to get out of the moment and ask yourself what was going on. So it was more intense, more cathartic, more frenetic than any writing I've ever done before. But ultimately, it was actually incredibly rewarding because I really do feel like, I got my therapy by writing a book.
So I feel like some other people can get their therapy too, whether they're reading it, listening to it. What are a couple important things you want people to learn here? Because you go from everything from, all the way back to the Iliad to, racial inequality to everything happening with COVID. So what are some things you want people to learn here?
I think probably the biggest overall message I want to get across is, we've been living our life in a way that has taken on a lot of risks. It's given us a lot of dynamism. It's given us a lot of progress. But if you think about it, we have this very open system. Everybody in the world can participate. We're moving very fast. Information technology accelerates all that stuff. All that gives you a lot of upsides, a lot of dynamism. But it creates a lot of instability. And if you just think back to the last 20 years, we've had 9/11, the world almost, careening to a halt, and this massive, war on terror. We've had the global financial crisis, this extraordinary shutdown of the global economy because of the cascade of failed financial products. And now we have a COVID, a pandemic. They're very different. I mean, in some sense, one was a geopolitical crisis, one was an economic crisis, this one is a health crisis, but they're all part of a very open, very dynamic system. And so one thing I want people to understand is, as we go forward, let's ask ourselves, whether it's climate change, whether it's the droughts, the forest fires, whether it's factory farming, which is, incredibly unsafe. I can go into that. Whether it's financial systems. Do we need a little more resilience? Do we need a little bit more stability? Do we need to give ourselves, if you think about like driving a race car, do we need airbags? Do we need seat belts? Do we need to buy some insurance? Because otherwise, my fear is that this pandemic, COVID-19, will turn out to be the dress rehearsal. And we're going to have another crisis one of these days that's going to be too big to handle.
What's really interesting here is that there should have been preparation because, like you said, there's going to be something else that comes up along the way. And we're really rethinking about how to do everything here. So when you think forward, I mean, even with how we govern as a country, what do you think is most important, whether it's another Trump presidency or it's Joe Biden? What are some really important things to focus on going forward?
It's a great question because actually it doesn't matter whether it's Trump or Biden in the sense of what we structurally need to do. We need to first recognize that we failed. I mean, the United States really failed at this. We're 5% of the world's population, actually 4% of the world's population, and we have 25% of the cases. Our COVID death rate is 20 times that of Germany. It is 2,000 times that of Taiwan. And we're the country with all the leading health institutions, pharmaceutical companies, research universities, and we spend the most of any country in the world on health. So we should be number one. We're kind of at the bottom of the heap, or at least in the bottom quartile. So the main thing I think we need to learn from that failure is we need a much more effective and inclusive government, particularly with regard to healthcare. So effective, we are just our governmental institutions are broken. 40 years of defunding them, of demeaning them, of delegitimizing them. Ronald Reagan saying government is not the solution, government is the problem. Steve Bannon coming in and saying the goal of the Trump revolution is to deconstruct the administrative state. Guess what? You keep trying to wage war on the government, come a pandemic, it ain't going to function very well. So part of it is really trying to understand why it is that we need a strong, capable, and effective government, because there are a lot of these crises nobody can take on their own. The private sector can't fight COVID. The private sector can't fight climate change. The private sector can't fight, some kind of crazy cyber attacks. All those are going to require, that we do this collectively. And the word for that is we do it using government. But beyond that, I think, we need to understand that it's not the way. My lesson number 2 is it's not the quantity of government, it's the quality of government. And this cuts beyond left and right. It's trying to figure out what makes government work, learning from countries like Taiwan or Singapore or Denmark or Germany, and say, why does our government have so many dysfunctions? Take New York City, for example. I live here. We haven't built a major infrastructure project in New York in 35 years. We haven't been able to do the Pennsylvania station rebuild that every governor and every mayor for 25 years has said is one of their top priorities. Think about that. It's one of the richest countries in the world, one of the richest cities in the world. It's one station, one train station. We haven't been able to do it. So we've got to get our act together.
It's really crazy when you put it in that context. And one of the things I love about your work, whether it's the book, your TV show on CNN, you know how to identify problems, you're hopeful about solutions, and you're willing to speak your mind also. And listen, in 2016, you didn't think Donald Trump would win the presidency. Obviously, that went a little bit differently. And here in 2020, you're saying the same thing. So why is it important for you to use your platform, whether it's the book, the TV show, to really speak your mind, whether it's about COVID, the president, or of the like?
It's a great question, because I was trained in a much more analytic model of being very careful and very cautious about what you say. I'm a lapsed academic, so I don't want to be partisan, and I try not to be. I try to provide people with analysis and arguments, so that even if you disagree with me, you see where I'm coming from. You learn from the facts. You may draw a different conclusion, and I've never used an ad hominem argument against somebody. It's never personal. But I feel like people now want authenticity, and they want to know, what are you really thinking? Behind there, you may say you on the one hand, on the other hand, you're making a judgment call. People want to know, what's your judgment call? What's your best guess, about what's going on? And so I thought it was worth telling people, look, when I look at all the evidence, I think Trump is going to lose, separate from whether I want him to lose or not. And the way I interpret the data, actually, the reality is Donald Trump has never been very popular. A majority of Americans have always disapproved of him. He has the lowest approval rating of any president in recorded history. And we have polling data from the 40s. So this is a long time. The truth is, in 2016, what happened is he ran against somebody who turned out to be very polarizing as well. Hillary Clinton is basically the second most unpopular presidential candidate in modern American history. And then, because of the Electoral College, because of 3 states, he won. A legitimate victory, but it was a narrow one because of those factors. Ever since then, he's never had an approval rating over 46, 47%, never had a majority approving of what he did. And now, Biden has the largest lead over him that any presidential candidate has had since Bill Clinton had one over Bob Dole in 1996. Look, all this could be wrong, but at the end of the day, we do have to use data. We have to use science. You learn from your mistakes. And I would say the overwhelming evidence is that Trump is going to lose, and he's going to lose rather convincingly. If it turns out that I'm wrong, I will admit to it. But I think I owe it to my readers, to my viewers, to my listeners, to say to them, this is what it looks like to me.
Fareed, you always keep it real. Thanks so much for the time. Stay healthy and enjoy all this, okay?
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.